Hey guys, so I have an 8-year-old daughter who was in second grade. Now we don't know what she's in because she's out of school. But as a second grader, you actually start learning about U.S. history. So she can tell you all about George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and all those stories that we call history, but really aren't. Like there was no cherry tree, there was none of that stuff, but we call that history. But we think that's important, right? To study U.S. history. Next year in third grade, she's going to study the most important history you can study, which is Texas history. Let's be honest, right? And we would say that's important. Learn about the Alamo, learn about San Jacinto, learn about Texas history. But why do we say learning about U.S. history, learning about Texas history is so important? The reason is, obviously, it's our history, right? You're an American. Maybe you're a Texan, right? It's your history. And when we study the history, our history, we learn where we've been, but more importantly, a lot of times we learn where we need to go, right? And so what we want to do for the next several weeks is talk about Acts, because you might not know this, but the book of Acts is our history. It's not just some book that's about distant, far away events, far away people. This is the history of our church, even First Baptist Church. What happened in Acts is still going on at First Baptist Church. What happened in Acts is what's going on at the bridge. It's our history. And we want to look back because it tells us where we've been, but more importantly, it tells us where we need to go, which is unbelievably important right now, right? Because here's the thing. Our culture and our world honestly feels like we don't know where to go or what to do, right? It's kind of like if you're driving in a new city. Like for my job at MSU, I have to drive in either a city I've never been in or parts of cities that I've never been in. And of course, the entire time I'm driving in a place that I've never been, I'm relying on a phone, right? My phone is the authority. It's telling me where to go. But what happens, and this might have happened to you before, what happens when your phone loses signal? And you're driving and you're going, I know I need to exit somewhere, but your phone is just going, it's just not even there. Like you start freaking out, like I don't know where I am or where to go from here, right? Or if you're in a city and you're driving around and maybe they're doing construction, and so you're on a road and it doesn't know you're on a road, or it thinks you're in a field because it doesn't know the road is now here, right? And it's going recalculating. And you're going, quit recalculating, like figure this out. I need to know where to go, right? The reason we freak out and we're stressed out is because the authority figure, right? Like our phone doesn't know where we are, or it doesn't know how to tell us where to get where we're going, right? Our culture, our society, our world is feeling like a driver with no authority. Like we don't know where to go right now. Like think about everything that we look for comfort, right? Think of the things that our culture, like who we are, where we look for comfort. A lot of times we look to entertainment, right? Like entertainment, movies or sporting events, all canceled, shut down, right? We look to the economy. Like, is our bank account good? Like, do we have enough money? A lot of that's in question right now, right? We look to the government. Like, the government will tell us what to do. But right now we have some government officials saying this and some government officials saying that. And we're going, well, who's the authority? Where do we go, right? Or even our own healthcare, system. We think well, that will never go away. That's strong. It's going to be good. But our healthcare system is right now saying we're on the verge of being overwhelmed. Right? And so everything we look to for comfort is starting to go away. And in fact, the very last thing we always look to comfort is people. Like I'll just get my people around me, my family or my church or people, my friends. I'll get them close. But of course we have social distancing now. So where do we look? We're like a driver driving, looking at a phone that's saying recalculating. I don't know what to tell you where to go next. It doesn't know where we are or where to go next. So where do we look? I honestly believe we should look back to Acts. It's our history. And here's the thing that Acts tells us. It tells us about an uncertain time. This was a super uncertain time in the world. It tells us about an uncertain time and an uncertain church meeting the needs of an uncertain time. And so that's really appropriate for us because we are an uncertain church meeting the needs of an uncertain time. So we're going to spend some weeks looking at Acts. We'll put out some questions for you guys to discuss or think about on your own. And so we're going to jump right in. Acts chapter 1. Today we're just going to cover the first 11 verses of Acts. Okay, we're going to do it quickly, get you out of here. But Acts chapter 1, here's what it says, verse 1. In my former book, Theophilus, I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and teach. So Luke wrote the book of Acts. He also wrote the Gospel of Luke. He was a physician. He was not a disciple of Jesus, but he interviewed all the disciples of Jesus. He hung out with Paul. He wrote the Gospel of Luke, and he says, okay, that's volume 1. Here's what Jesus did. And he starts Acts, like this is the history of the early church. And so his intro line says, look, in my first volume, in the first letter, the book of Luke, I taught about or wrote about everything that Jesus did and taught. All the things that he did and taught, all that he would do and teach. This is really important for us to grab hold of. Jesus' ministry could really be summed down to 2 things. The things he did and the things that he taught. Right? His miracles illustrated his teaching. And his teaching explained his miracles. But notice, Jesus was constantly doing and teaching. And this is so vitally important for us right now. Because I think the church has been really great at teaching for a really long time. We're great at teaching. We're not always so great at doing. Right? Let me give you an example. It is really easy for us to gather on a Sunday morning and for somebody to stand up and say, let me talk to you today about loving your neighbor. And we can sit there and applaud and go, oh, what a great sermon. We talked about loving our neighbor. We discussed an idea. It's a great idea. It's easy for us to discuss. We feel good about it. The difficult thing is when you get in the parking lot and you drive away to actually love your neighbor. Right? So we've been great at teaching, but not always about doing. And maybe if there's any bright side to coronavirus and all of this, maybe it's this. Maybe God is kind of shaking us out of the teaching bubble we've been in and saying now it's on you. Like go out in the world and actually love your neighbor, right? Serve them, encourage them, talk to them. As best you can, gather around one another, right? And one of the ways, honestly, practically, you can love one another is not to hoard toilet paper, for crying out loud. It's not a disease that toilet paper can fix. So quit buying all of it, right? But here's the thing. Like we can actually do what we've been teaching, right? The other day in Walmart, my daughters and I are walking around and we just needed some general food. And so we go to the ground beef section and it's wiped out. And I kind of probably made a disappointed look and probably hung my head a little bit because I was like, man, we just need ground beef and we can't get any ground beef. And very clearly, a Muslim lady walked up, head covered. Muslim lady walked up, and of course I probably look sad because I got 2 little girls and they're staring at an empty case and I'm staring at an empty case. And she says, hey, do you need some ground beef? And I look from her to her cart and she's got 2 pounds of ground beef. She's clearly not hoarding ground beef, but she's like, do you want some of my ground beef? And I smiled at her and I said, no, I think we're okay. We'll be fine. But thank you for the offer. Listen, she might not know the one true God, but she's doing an excellent job of loving her neighbor, right? Maybe God is shaking us out to say, hey, be like my son. Do and teach. Teach and do, right? So let's go on. He says, in my first book, I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and teach. Verse 2, until the day he was taken up to heaven, after giving instructions through the Holy Spirit to the apostles he had chosen. After his suffering, he presented himself to them and gave them many convincing proofs that he was alive. He appeared to them over a period of 40 days and spoke about the kingdom of God. This is so important for us to remember, right? What Luke says here is this. Yeah, in my first letter, I told you about how Jesus suffered. I told you about how Jesus died. We know that happened. But then 3 days later, I also told you about this in the first volume, right? He came back to life. And here he says, remember, he was with us for 40 days. For 40 days, he hung out with his disciples. He continued to teach. He continued to explain what it is they were going to do, right? In fact, Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 that Jesus appeared to over 500 different people. He says, if you don't believe me, go ask any one of the 500 people that he appeared to. The thing to know is this, is that people have been trying to shut Christianity down from the very beginning. People right then were enemies of the message and could not shut it down because there was over 500 people walking around going, no, I definitely saw him. He definitely came back alive. The important thing to know here is this. We don't serve a God who has a tombstone. Every other world religion, every other major world religion has a guy who was the leader of it, who has a tombstone that you can go visit where they are. Our God is not dead. He is very much alive. Even in the midst of 2020 and coronavirus and all the crazy, he is very, very much still alive. So he goes on to verse 6. So Jesus has been 40 days with them. He's going to gather them up on a mountaintop. And here's what happens in verse 6. Then they gathered around him and asked him, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom of Israel? This is such an important question. Listen to what they ask. They're standing there, and they're like, are you going to bring Israel back? Like, is this the end of it all? Like, you rose from the dead. We totally believe in you now. We're totally on your team. Are you going to bring Israel back to its glory days? Are you going to kick Rome out, give us a strong military, give us a strong economy, like make our lives full of comfort and ease? And honestly, they sound very much the way we sound. God, how long is this going to last? When are you going to fix this so that we can have a life of comfort and ease, right? When are you going to do this? When are you going to fix it all? When are you going to come back? When are you going to restore all things, make all things new? Like, we don't want to go through these hard times, so when are you going to fix these? But notice what Jesus says in response to the question. Are you going to restore Israel? Is this the life of comfort and ease? Is that coming? Look what he says in verse 7. He said to them, it's not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority. Here's what he says. Essentially, he says this. They say, hey, Jesus, you going to restore the kingdom? Like, give us this great life? Fix all of our problems? And he says this. It's none of your business, really. Essentially, it's none of your business. That's not in your job description for you to worry about, right? I have two jobs, right? I work for MSU. I work for First Baptist Church. Both of those jobs have job descriptions. Job descriptions narrow down my focus. They tell me what I should be worried about, and they also tell me what I have no business worrying about, right? In other words, my job here at First Baptist is to lead the college ministry for the time being, right? I'm not supposed to be worried about what songs they're singing on Sunday morning. I don't walk into the music department and say, here's what songs y'all should play this Sunday, right? It's not in my job description. It's not what I'm supposed to be focused on. They can handle that. I got this. Jesus says, look, that's not in your job description. This is not for you to know. I will restore things. I will renew them. I will make all things right. I will bring about a great conclusion to this, but it's not for you to know when. Then he says, but let me tell you what your job description is. Verse 8. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and the ends of the earth. Jesus, are you going to bring about the end? Like, are you going to solve all these problems and give us a life of comfort and ease? Jesus said, not your job description. Here's what your job description is. You're going to receive power, and then you're going to go out and be my witnesses to the whole world. Right? To the whole world. Now, here's the thing. You're going to hate what I say next. But it was suffering. It was hard circumstances that got them to the point where they fulfilled that. It was actually suffering and hard circumstances that got them to the ends of the earth. Right? I think if I'd have been standing on the mountain that day, if I'd have been one of the 11 up there with Jesus, and Jesus says, hey, look, you're going to go to the ends of the earth, I think they probably heard it the way I would have heard it. And this is the way I would have heard it. If Jesus says, hey, you're going to go to the ends of the earth, I'd have said, not me. Like Peter, maybe. Like, he's crazy. He'll do that stuff, you know, but not me. Like, I like Jerusalem. I like the food. I know the restaurants. I know the hangouts. I like the people. I know the language. I'm comfortable. I'm going to stay where I know. Like, the other guys can go, but I'm going to stay where I know. They probably all were thinking the same thing. Like, I just don't see how that's possible. So they leave, and we're going to see in future chapters, they go back to Jerusalem, and they hang out there for a little while. But what ends up happening is this. Hard circumstances break out. First, there's threats. And the threats say, you'll stop talking about Jesus. And then that advances to flogging and beating. You will stop talking about Jesus. And then that advances to execution. You should have stopped talking about Jesus. And when persecution broke out, that's incredibly hard circumstances. When it broke out, they scattered. They fled. And as they fled, they fulfilled this mission. They took his message. They were witnesses to the ends of the earth. Again, hear me. Maybe coronavirus, maybe this pandemic is about shaking us loose from this huddle that we're in, this bubble that we're in, this teaching-centered bubble. And it's saying, go serve, go be witnesses of a God who gives hope. Go be stable in a world that is unstable. Go love and serve in a world that is selfish. Go. It is through suffering, through hard circumstances, that most of the time the church moves. So this is what happens at the end of the story, verse 9. After he said this, he was taken up before their very eyes, and a cloud hid him from their sight. So literally a cloud kind of envelops Jesus, and he ascends into heaven. They're just staring like, this is crazy. You know, the early church fathers thought that Psalm 24 was actually written about what happened when Jesus ascends into heaven. They looked at Psalm 24 and said, this must have been the moment that fulfilled Psalm 24. Psalm 24, verse 7 through 10. Here's what it says. Lift up your heads, you gates. Be lifted up, you ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty. The Lord, mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, you gates. Lift them up, you ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord Almighty. He is the King of glory. The early church fathers saw this and went, this must have been the fulfillment, that Jesus just flings open the gates to heaven and ascends the throne. Lift up your head, you gates. Open up, you old ancient doors. Who's coming in? It's the King of glory. And who is this King of glory? He is strong. He is mighty. He's the Lord of battle. That's who is on the throne. Jesus is very much alive. He's very much on the throne, even right now in the midst of this. And so he ends right here. They were looking intently up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly two men dressed in white stood beside them. Men of Galilee, they said, why do you stand here looking into the sky? This same Jesus who's been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven. In other words, the angels show up and say, hey, why are you still hanging out here? Go. He told you what to do. Go. Go spread the word through your doing, through your teaching. Go. The King of glory is on his throne. Go. He'll come back. He'll make things right. But in the meantime, use the time, right? Use the time through the way you live and through the things you teach. Use the time to serve the world and to teach his message. My hope and prayer for you is this, that you would know the King of glory is still on his throne, that he is alive, that he is in control. He will provide and protect you because he is strong and mighty. I pray that you will seek him, submit to him, and that as you seek and submit to him, he will guide you. And that you will look for ways to serve and teach other people around you and teach them that you have a God who is alive, who is on his throne, that is giving you hope in the midst of tough times. We'll see you soon.